just a firm believer of bringing in more than just, oh, I'm providing rates. I remember I was at Chuck E. Cheese a couple weeks ago, and where I was racing my nephew, and you're choosing the cars, and every car's got handling, speed, brakes. Well, in a broker, it should be like sends market updates, is a passionate partner, really quick responses. Help yourself get a lot more kind of attributes and qualities than just, oh, he gives us really good rates. You don't want to be known as somebody that just, oh, we have great rates. Sure, that's one piece. The rate's always how you get in, get out. But beyond the rate, what else is there? What service are you providing? What's the energy and the emotional intelligence that you bring into the supply chain? Are you a hothead? Are you somebody that when things go wrong and you can't handle it yourself, you immediately call the client and say, or you work it out a little bit, and then there's a point where you say, okay, this is a level 2 escalation to get the client involved.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Sales-CRM. They are one of the only CRMs built specifically for freight brokers and freight agents. Not only can you manage your shipper sales prospecting, you can also manage your carriers and the lanes they run directly in the CRM. Check out sales-crm.com, and thanks again for the sponsorship. Now, let's dive into today's episode. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and I'm excited to have Ben Bar-Lev. He's a national account sales for Echo Global Logistics. Ben, welcome to the pod, man.
Thank you so much for having me, Thomas. Pleasure's all mine.
Dude, it's so good to finally do this with you and have you on the show and talk about, your career in logistics and with Echo and, what you're doing. Some of the cool stories you're sharing on LinkedIn lately have really been relatable for, I think, a lot of people in our audience. And I wanted to kind of share some of those with the audience, kind of what you're doing over there. And, some of the maybe prospecting tips you can give out, because I think that, just kind of staying, with the basics is kind of getting lost in our industry and in sales in general. So, I'm excited to have you on, brother.
I'm super excited. And like you mentioned, we've known each other for a bit. You've had a lot of good content, and we kind of connected because the LinkedIn supply chain network, right, is small. It's small. You see the same people talking about the same things, but you also start seeing people like you, other people that I follow, that start giving you a different perspective. And like I told you before, I've only gained expertise, knowledge, experience, connections by connecting with people on LinkedIn. And I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm excited to talk.
Of course, man. Of course. So why don't we dive right in? What's kind of your background? How did you get into logistics for the last 11 years with Echo, right? You've been there for a long time. So why don't you share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, man. I'm turning 35 this Saturday. I started at Echo when I was 23, living with my parents.
Happy early birthday, brother.
Thank you. I'm somebody that I'm a big birthday guy, because there's a lot of people in freight, they hide their birthdays. I find those birthdays. All right, so if you're hiding a birthday, I'll find it. But I've been here 20, but I've been here 11 years. I started when I was 23. I was with my parents, and I make this a very known story that I was not good at jobs, we'll put it that way. I've had over 20 jobs before I found Echo, and it was because I wasn't motivated. I didn't have structure. I firmly believe that, especially in today's world, you need to have mentors. You can't do it by yourself. Yeah, there's all YouTube and courses and master classes, but you really need somebody that's done it and that's willing to teach you, hey, there's other ways to do it, right? And so what had happened is my dad was frankly tired of me being a freeloader, and he reached out to all of his friends and he said, guys, please help me get my son a job. And one of those people was an agent that works here, and he did a great job introducing me. He set up the interview, and basically, what the funny part is I started at a small acquisition of ours where there was basically 30, 40 people, family-owned company from the 50s. Echo, purchased them for a reason or two. And they brought me on to Echo, but I had a very intimate training experience for several years, which has kind of shaped the way that I work, right? And that experience was one very militant. It was at a place, again, that everyone knew exactly what they needed to do. These people on this side do pickups. These people on that side do deliveries. Middles dispatch. Nobody cross-pollinated, right? Pros and cons to that, but point being is I sat right by operations. And so I learned operations for my first 5, 6 years. I was covering everything myself. I couldn't take a lunch. I was very resentful of people that would be like, hey, let's go to lunch. I'm like, do you know how busy I am? How dare you? And so then, years 5, 6, and 7 and, forward, it just clicked to me, especially when I met my wife. Then she was my girlfriend 6 years ago, but I had this overwhelming sensation of, okay, this new person came into my life. I need to find a way to still do well at work, but give her the time she deserves, right? In layman's terms. And so that led me to team selling, team operating, team, switching my emails from I to we, switching my emails from like, hey, it's Ben to, hey, good morning, team. Yeah. Everything I do embodies team. I really do believe in supply chain from an operation standpoint, that each person plays a specific role. And to your point, I really try focusing on the basics, right? Yeah. The basics of picking up your phone, responding to an email, just being available when you need to be available. I've witnessed over my 11 years, not just in supply chain, but other places. There's a lot of people that say, hey, that's not my job. This is what I do. If it's anything besides that, I don't do that. Yeah. And I found that the people that excel in business and life, what have you, are people that say, you know what, I'm willing to help. And so I really grabbed onto as many mentors as I could. If there's a subject matter like RFPs that I didn't know, years ago, I'd reach out, who's the best RFP person here? Reach out to them, shadow them, right? It's all about shadowing people. And I think in freight, there's that model of, okay, trial by fire, just throw these kids in there, make 30, 40, 50 calls a day. For me, I've never found that to be successful. I mean, that's how you can find opportunities, but I don't think that's how you convert opportunities. And where I've been raised is to do your due diligence before you even send that email, right? Reverse the chair that you're receiving that email. Does that convince you to do business with them? Absolutely. And a lot of the emails that I've seen, it's funny how many people reach out to sales reps thinking that we have some pool on the other side of the coin or what have you. But a lot of it is, hey, I'm Thomas from ABC Company. We have 400 trucks. We go everywhere. We do LTL, full truckload, intermodal, partials. And you're like, wow, you guys do a lot. What do you specialize in, right? Yep. I just feel like the bar in logistics has gotten very low because we've had a very tough 2 years. Right. It's been very tough. COVID, 20, we'll call half of 20, 21, and then we'll call half of 22. You were making incredible money. People were calling you saying, hey, I need help. Yeah. Right. And then now it's the exact opposite. I'm a big analogy guy because I think freight does a really poor job of explaining simple things. And this market right now is very similar to the real estate market in the sense that there's not a lot of freight. Right. So we'll call it houses. And there's a bunch of real estate brokers. And so everyone's just calling all these people that have houses being like, hey, beautiful house, want to sell it? And it's like, I'm not even in the market. You haven't even done your research. Or it's like, you're the third person to call me today. And so you have to figure out, how do you differentiate yourself? Right. And I think on this podcast, we'll talk about a couple of things that I've done to make myself a little bit of a breath of fresh air when it comes to other people. But it all stems from the mentorship and the path that I chose of bringing in people and really helping me grow in this space, not by myself. Yeah, said a lot there.
No, you did, but there's a lot I want to go through because I think you said a lot of good things. So something you said is mentorship a lot and shadowing and learning. So what is like your process for learning and like what is like your like go to, right? Like obviously shadowing's a really good way. Having mentors. Do you also do a lot of like, do you read? Do you listen to other podcasts? Do you do like a lot of newsletter stuff? What are some of those other ways do you like to learn that are not as traditional, that people can also like maybe?
I'm gonna give you everything. Number one is my friend Thomas has a podcast. A little plug. But I'm on FreightWaves every day. And I'm not just on the website. They have a great YouTube page. They have a great What the Truck with Dooner. They have a great, super informative. What I love the most about the YouTube page of FreightWaves, it gives you perspectives that you're not going to get by yourself in the broker seat. What are drivers saying about brokers? What are carriers saying? What is the energy when you're talking about freight from different perspectives and what pain points do people deal with? And then on top of that, LinkedIn, listen, you can treat LinkedIn like Instagram and just like people and like. There has to be intention. And when you use the algorithm correctly, the gifts that these connections are giving me. So I will give you tidbits. There's a guy named Jason Miller. He goes head to head with FreightWaves a lot. He's a supply chain professor at Michigan State, #1 supply chain in the nation. Now, FreightWaves, him and Craig have a back and forth. I enjoy it, but I read them both, right? The complaint of Craig is that, hey, he's using government data and it's dated and it's not as live. Sure, but it's still, Jason paints a really good picture. And then through him, I found a bunch of people that are just constantly posting information about the financial aspect of the world, right? The economy, but as it pertains to freight and then inbounds. And there's a lot of things that you can just learn, right? Between YouTube, between the newsletters that exist, or just on LinkedIn. And I think another way, when you hear shadowing, if you're in a brokerage, if you're in any model, what they do is they get somebody experienced, they get somebody unexperienced, and they pair them like Pokemon. What actually happens is that experienced person's really busy. That inexperienced person's just looking. They don't really talk because the guy's like, shh, I'm on a phone call. Shh, oh, Carrie called. Or they're trying to explain, their phone rings because they're busy, right? Yeah. So I've never found that to be good. I've found that the best way to do things is to really dedicate time with that subject matter expert. So when when I shadow with people, I'm setting up 30 to 45 minutes with them, dedicated time, with the understanding that, hey, this is dedicated, right? You're not going to get the best out of everyone. You're going to get people that are multitasking, right? Just like me telling people I'm busy, right? You need people that are going to be committed because that's kind of like the role model that you want. Somebody that's really willing to share, because if you get the wrong kind of experienced person, they're going to give you a completely different kind of idea of what freight is. And so for me, it's really, like I told you, going onto YouTube, seeing freight-related podcasts, going onto LinkedIn, and not just reading BS on LinkedIn, but people that are posting really informative stuff, because when you regurgitate that and you say it to your clients, they just think you're a genius. And when they go on my LinkedIn, the whole purpose of my LinkedIn profile is clients, as you know, they check you out. You send them an email and they check you out. And I want clients, when they check me out, to know that I'm involved. I'm not some pessimistic person. And I really do focus on partnerships, because the amount of time and money, to a degree, that we spend on relationships exceeds sometimes that transactional model where, okay, you'll give me a couple loads, but you need to be in a place where you can build scalable programs that are mutually beneficial across the shipper, the carrier, and obviously you.
I absolutely love that approach, Ben. And I think that the multi-channel, the multifaceted approach that you take to stay in tune and to understand like what's going on, and to keep learning, and to not just, listen to the internal chatter and the internal, things that are going on. I came from originally the TQL atmosphere, so I know how that, that comes from.
TQL, a great partner.
Yeah, I had a great, time there for my 2 years that I was there. I had a great mentor who taught me everything I know, and was absolutely fantastic. And I had a couple of other great mentors from there that just taught me everything they knew. But yeah, it just comes down to having those, like you said, being intentional, but like being able to, or being willing to learn, and being willing to take in that information. And be willing to evolve and change kind of your approach and how
you're never done.
Exactly, you're never done. If you think you know everything, you're out of luck, because there's a lot more to learn.
We were just talking a sports analogy earlier this morning about Romo and Brady, and how Romo, once he became a starter, he felt like he had all the answers, but Brady was continuing to learn. And that's something that I think is really important. I'm in sales, but it's all about ego. It's not just about sales. It's about operations. It's about every person that carries some role in the supply chain. They can't have some ego, right? Because you're going to get burned left and right. Bad things are going to happen, but you just got to keep pushing. You got to keep pushing. At the end of the day, what I believe, I'm very big on energy, especially in freight. And I believe that you spend a lot more energy being negative, being passive aggressive, than you would being positive. In my opinion, when I'm positive, when I'm giving out that energy, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting more energy. I'm getting more pumped. And so that's something that I focus on. And every step that I take has to be a step forward. And going back to like never settling, you're never done learning because everything's evolving. Mexico, look at it the past 2 years. You know, if you're not stepping up your Mexico game, you're missing out on a lot because, and we'll touch on this, everyone's competing against the same thing. They're all trying to go after domestic truckloads and LTLs and partials, and then they're just cannibalizing margins. So how do you make a name for yourself outside of those modes?
Yeah, exactly. I want to dive into, so you shared a story recently on LinkedIn. I want to dive into it. I'm going to read it to the audience because they may not have seen it.
Sure.
So Ben shared, it says, my first call with Partake Brewing was April 14th, 2023. Our first load with them was delivered last week. That's nearly 500 days between first call and first load. Never stop following up. I think that goes to show, I mean, man, 500 days between your first call, your first load. I've had first calls where I've landed a first load, and I've definitely had situations like yours where I've had, you know, almost a year, over a year of continuously following up. What, you know, how do you maintain that level of like persistence and continuing to add value to that prospect for you know almost 2 full years?
There's a lot that goes into it, and I appreciate you shouting out that post because that account took much longer than I thought to kind of kick off, right? It was one of those calls where the first one, okay, we'll talk to you in a month, but then there's changes. The biggest thing is you have to be intentional. You have to be organized. The only reason I kept following up with them is because I had organizational tools to know where they're at, to keep the account in my name, you know, all that time. And what I also do is I use a lot of tools, whether it's Google, whatever. Anytime there was an article about them, anytime, you know, I subscribed to non-alcoholic beer stuff, and anytime I thought I could provide value, whether it was from a freight market perspective of, hey, I send monthly market updates to my clients today, pull from other people, right? You know, Jason Miller's post, maybe a Freight Waves article, different kind of things. And when you're constantly educating people, there's value in that. Now, when you are the typical broker that just calls, I never called Partake. I never called him and said, hey, man, just want to check in, right? Yeah. They're busy. But what I did do is I kept my name hot, and I knew that they were interested because he always responded to my outreaches. If this was an account that you're just trying nonstop and they're not responding, I don't think that's a good mix. But in this case, they were really thankful that they, you know, some accounts get worried that there's like a shot clock on the partnership.
Right.
I'm so sorry, we're not giving you freight. Once I kind of felt that in an email that he kept apologizing, I said, listen, there is no expiration to this offer. You proceed when it's natural. Yeah. I'm very big on like sliding doors moments. It's how I met my wife. If I met her a week before, a week later, it wouldn't have been the right time. Yeah. And that's the same thing with partners. You can't rush them. And I'm a firm believer. If I told you that I haven't called somebody in 5 years, I think you'd be surprised, right? But that's the truth. I don't just call people. I set up calls through email. I say, hey, can we dedicate time? Just like with the mentorship. And with Partake, we had a couple calls. The guy would give me some time where he was like, hey, I need to learn about the market, because in Partake's case, they do a lot of cross-border stuff, right? And they're just getting into this market. And so that educational piece and providing value beyond the 3-question broker of how's your weekend? How can I help you? What's in the pipeline? Everyone's doing that, right? And in this case with Partake, it wasn't so much about the first load. It was just showing that whenever you're ready, we're going to be here and we'll ship, right? That confidence of I'm providing enough value here that when that opportunity comes, they're going to bring it to me. And they did. And the funny part is that they tested out another person along with me. And that other person had a completely different experience, right? Just because you got the opportunity doesn't mean that the job's done. The job's just started. It's a different part of the job. Now it's the race. When that load delivered, first of all, I was tracking that load every day. I've been here 11 years. I have other accounts that do way more volumes than this. But guess what? That account doesn't need to know, and they should never feel it. They should never care about how big your book is. Obviously, they want you to be successful, just like a doctor or whatever. You don't want them showing up in some rinky car. But at the end of the day, your accounts do not care if you're busy. They have a load. You need to service it. And so what reminders do you set? What visibility tools do you utilize to make sure that you are putting them at the top of your mind? And then otherwise, it's also just, separately showing them that you're genuine, that there aren't any strings attached, that there isn't, you just want to do business with them because you care. And then when you get that opportunity, you show them you care when you track. You show them you care when you send them a signed BOL and a POD, because you understand through those calls that that's how they get paid. So the sooner I give it to them, the sooner they get paid. And the other gentleman or a woman, I don't know who it was, they simply were non-existent, right? It was one of those companies where the sales rep's the face, and then when they have a load, the ops rep takes it. And there was a big disconnect. There was nobody picking up the phone. They had to call generic lines. So letting an account know that, yeah, I know it's it's our first shipment, but we're going to take this serious. Here's my cell. Here's an after hours contact. Here's the expectations for transit. Here's some things that might go wrong. What are we going to do when they go wrong, right? Letting them know every single side of the coin, that's where people gain trust. And through trust, partnership grows. And through trust, it also slows down them shopping. You can't control an account from shopping, but when you service the heck out of them, they're going to protect you when other people are like, well, this is a cheaper rate. Yeah, but are they servicing us like Ben? And so, one of the last things I'll say about Partake is when an account's giving you time, you have not earned the right to say it stops here. You keep going until they say, okay, we're here. What do we do now? Right. Mm-hmm. And it got to a point where I sent one update to Partake about just beer sales in America, stuff like that. And he reached out to me and said, hey man, next week's the week. We're finally ready. Right. And then now, once that load delivered, first thing I did is I followed up and I said, how's the experience? Right. And that's how that testimonial came. We in the logistics space need to do a better job of getting testimonials, right? Because when you today are choosing a vendor for your personal life, or you're choosing tires, or you're choosing a broker, or you're choosing a therapist, whatever, you're looking at reviews. And no matter who you use right now, there really isn't a site that can give you rating. And if there is ratings, everything in freight is, 1 star, this carrier dropped the ball. It's a very negative industry because there's a lot of bad players there. There really are. But Partake's an example of a good client and someone that had a long-term vision on my side, and just preparation mean opportunity. And then when that opportunity came, servicing it like my life depended on it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You're showing that, like you said, being genuine, showing you'll be there just by, setting up these times and going through creating custom market updates. I mean, those, like you said, you have other clients, you have a book of business, you have other prospects you're going after. So creating a custom market update that's tailored just to Partake. And obviously, you're sending certain market updates that may be more total market oriented, but hey, if they're geared towards cross-border right now, you may be sending them more cross-border updates than their normal truckload updates or whatever.
You're not sending them flatbed updates or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You're not sending them
relevant.
Yeah, exactly. You're sending them relevant information. And I know, I saw you were sending them like product in the stores and just blogs and articles. Like that's ways that you can go above and beyond and just talk about, like, if you see they have a new line coming out, like send them the article with the line that's coming out, or send them a picture of you holding their line, like, hey, this was amazing. Like, just that little feedback to say, or that little just bit of differentiator. Like you said, everyone's coming in like, hey, I can move your freight for you, but not everyone's coming in saying, hey, I tried this new product out. It was fantastic. Here's some couple of market updates that are relevant for what, you and I talked about a month ago. Let me know if there's anything else I can come up with or help you guys on that isn't even freight related. It's just being that expert, being that genuine person, that genuine, like you said, showing that you care, educating them, and being that expert, being that market expert that they need, because there's so much noise out there that they need to know that they can come to you and trust you and what you're saying. I think that's very valuable.
If I may, on that note,
please.
You mentioned something really good of, like, if you're pitching to somebody that you can buy their product, I'm a firm believer of investing in that partnership. Sometimes it's financial, of buying their product, right? And to your point, when I saw them in stores, when I went over to Oregon and I saw that, like, they had an advertisement there, I was in Washington, I feel like a proud father, and I haven't even moved a load yet. And that's what I think separates me from a lot of people, is I get emotionally attached to these accounts and I care about delivering that product. I own, if there's an issue or anything, it bothers me at night.
Yeah.
Can't say that about all my clients, but when there's a product that I can bring home, an example is I have a small client that does date syrup. This date syrup has become the most popular SKU in my family. My siblings use it. My parents use it. We put it on chicken. We put it on yogurt. And they think I'm a little bit cooler because I'm able to work with these people, right? And they were nice enough to send me swag. And now I gave my sister a sweatshirt. And so now the whole family's involved, right? Yeah. It's everyone wants the service that existed before all this automation. I just want to call Ben. I don't want to call AI. AI is great. Trust me, I utilize it in many ways. But my whole kind of thesis statement, if you will, is how can I combine everything, but still give them that old world, old school feel? Because for me as a vet, when I'm a client of people, like my mechanic is somebody that's in his 70s. And the way he services his clients, the way he does invoices, it's not the most tech way, it's not tech savvy, but people go there because they trust him. Yeah. When he says there's an issue, they don't say, oh, I'm going to get a second opinion. He is that advocate. He's the subject matter expert. And I'm just a firm believer of bringing in more than just, oh, I'm providing rates. I remember I was at Chuck E. Cheese a couple of weeks ago, and I was racing my nephew, and you're choosing the cars, and every car's got handling, speed, brakes. Well, in a broker, it should be like sends market updates, is a passionate partner, really quick responses. Help yourself get a lot more kind of attributes and qualities than just, oh, he gives us really good rates. You don't want to be known as somebody that just, oh, we have great rates. Sure, that's one piece. The rate's always how you get in, get out. But beyond the rate, what else is there? What service are you providing? What's the energy and the emotional intelligence that you bring into the supply chain? Are you a hothead? Are you somebody that when things go wrong and you can't handle it yourself, you immediately call the client and say, or you work it out a little bit, and then there's a point where you say, okay, this is a level 2 escalation to get the client involved. It's those small things and understanding what kind of client it is too. Is it a client that wants to be informed? Is it a client that kind of just, there's a lot of different buckets of clients. My favorite clients are the ones that say, listen, we're really good at what we do. You're really good at what you do. Let's set up weekly, bi-weekly calls to ensure that we're still aligned, and let's fly, right? So that's how I've modeled my business, is to be more of a partnership model as opposed to, hey, Ben, I have one pallet and I'll never talk to you again. Will I do that? Sure. If it's the right person, if it's a referral from somebody, sure. But I really try to build my book on consistent business because, Thomas, I'm sure you heard it in your TQL days, and even today, you're going to lose every account you ever got, and it won't be your fault half the time. Somebody's going to leave, new regime change, new agendas, what have you. So it's all about continuing that pipeline,
Absolutely. No, you're spot on. I lost one of my biggest, when I was at TQI, I lost my biggest cherry client just because they went out of business. I mean, it just happens.
Oh, that'll happen, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just happens. They filed for bankruptcy, they restructured, and then 3 months later ended up just having to completely close. So it just, those things happen, right? Like it like when you're moving 10 or 12 loads of cherries or anything like that, or you have other customers, like, and you mentioned referrals. I want to dive into that in a second. Like they were giving us referral business too. And like the referrals were honestly better, ended up being better customers than the original customer because they were more on they had been tenured a lot longer, but this guy had just been, around a couple of years, moving produce, had a lot of good referrals from people from the industry. We took the business on, and unfortunately that stuff happens. And like you said, you just have to have that pipeline growing and you may not add that client today, but hey, you have to keep the pipeline full, and you have to, provide the right amount of, service and that subject matter expert level for them to be able to stay engaged and potentially use you, down the line. You touched on referrals, and I want to dive into that because I think that's really interesting. What do you think are some of like maybe those key factors that build on the trust that maybe turn a first-time shipper like Partake into someone who would give you referrals down the line?
So referral game is really interesting because you got to take advantage of emotional energy is what I call it. If you just crushed it for a client, you just delivered a load that production was dependent on, use that to your advantage to say, hey, is there anyone else that you think can benefit from my services, right? And people think you can only ask that once. Every quarter I'll ask people, hey, it's that reminder again. And I typically do it face-to-face. It's very easy for somebody just to avoid. But when you're face to face with somebody, and I'm not saying teams, I really do like breaking bread with clients. Go into their office is one thing, but when you're able to break bread, and when I do it, I don't just take out logistics. I go and I sit with the warehouse guys. They're the ones that ensure that my product's getting loaded, or my truck, because everyone else are just taking out. They call us the suits. The suits come in, they take out 2 people, the 2 people leave, come back, they're all full, and guess who's hungry? The people that are actually moving and loading and taking care of your business. And so that's number one. Is referrals are one way when you ask for them, but I get a lot of referrals that people, you want to be the person where it's like, hey, do you know anyone? Yeah, I know Ben. And the way to do that, I get to know everyone on the account that sends an email that makes themselves visible. The sales rep, the accounting rep, the procurement rep, purchasing, whoever. If they're on an email thread, just today I have a client. He's a partnership manager for one of my clients, handles like a different portion. I've never really spoken to him. And I said, hey man, we've never spoken. I want you to know who I am. Here's my cell. If there's ever an escalation after hours, you call or text, right? Yeah. And he just goes, hey, thank you for that extra layer, right? That kind of stuff, when you have one account, I had an account in the past that's referred me 5 or 6 different companies, either by the person leaving that account and going somewhere else, or just saying, hey, I know Ben. Those are the best referrals, where it just comes out of nowhere. In the same breath, that's how you lose an account, or that's how you lose the business. You just get an email out of nowhere, or something just stops. That's why freight is such a tough place to work in consistently. It's tough to be somewhere. I've only worked at Echo that's my only freight job. I will never leave Echo. It's where my identity lies, because I know how to sell here. I know how to win. Every other brokerage asset, they all have different strategies, right? And when you stay in your corner, when you're focused on a couple things and you do them well, watch the referrals start coming, because there's a lot of people that just need reliable people. Not as a primary. And that's something that I tell all my clients. I don't care if I'm primary or backup. As long as you treat me with respect, you give me a heads up, you don't set me up to fail. And what does fail mean? Here's your load. It's the 30th of August, right before Labor Day. That happened to me like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Here's your shot, Ben. Now, did I service it? Did it go okay? It went all right. We were late on pickup, but delivered, got everything going. But I'm a perfectionist at work. Yeah. I'm like, man, if I knew this account was going to come to me and I had another day, I could have prepped a little bit better, right? I could have ensured that every T's crossed, I's dotted. And with referral game, especially, I'll add testimonials. Yeah. Because how can you get an account in the same vertical to do business with you? Very easy. You tell them who you work with in that vertical, and here's a testimonial from them. Yeah. Because for me, when I reach out to clients, I never do who am I? I never say, oh, I'm Ben from Echo. That's what my signature says. And I argue with a lot of people about that, but I don't double introduce. I always say hello to the client, and I tell them, hey, how did I find you? What do I want? What are next steps? And so a lot of ways it can look like, hey, a food and beverage company in the grocery store. It's just like, let's say it's a popcorn client. I ship with these popcorn clients. Here's the issues that I found. They're really high classes. We use partial truckloads, right? Intermodal is a really good play. It's custom to that vertical. And then I add the testimonial from a popcorn client who's just repeating what I said. That aids to character. You are not getting into an account right now unless you know somebody, you were referred, or like going back, you got to know somebody. It's very rare to call somebody right now in this market, get a great opportunity, and then boom, you're ready to go. On average, my accounts take about 4 to 5 months to close. Big, small, medium. And when I say close, shipping one load isn't closed. Like Partake's not closed, right? We just shipped our first load. In fact, it's just started. And so I think in freight, a lot of people celebrate too early. You mentioned your cherry client that went bankrupt. I had a tortilla client in COVID that closed it 3 a week reefer. I had about 125 GP, so it's a volume play. And the day that we were supposed to go live, I didn't get the tenders. And so I called them and the phone line's disconnected. And I'm like, what's going on? A week goes by. I get an email from someone that I didn't know. And they said, you will not believe this. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the warehouse caught fire over the weekend. And all those people are furloughed and we're probably not going to bring them back. And the opportunity just died, Wow. And so because of that, I genuinely am very superstitious, and I believe in what I call the freight gods, where you can't celebrate stuff before it's closed. You can't be cocky.
Yeah.
Clients don't need you, right? You do a good job. It's great to have you, but they can find somebody else, and you have to remember that. And that's what I mean about the ego. I am second fiddle on some of my biggest clients, that when the first string drops the ball, they give us a bunch of freight at our margins, right? But Absolutely. You have to be okay knowing that you're not going to get freight for a couple months, right? So how do you stay relevant?
Absolutely. I used to love being number 3 or number 4 in the routing guide, but I'd make a lot of money every month at the end of the quarter at the busy shipping times
Sure.
when no one else could add value, and we could hold our rates when others couldn't. I want to touch on something you said is really interesting, because you never know where a load is going to come from, right? And you're big on breaking bread with the entire team. Everything is about the team. And you never know, like, you could be dealing with the logistics manager or the director of supply chain for months, and they could be giving you loads, but you never know when you're talking with that inbound or that director of inventory, and they're like, hey, Ben, someone dropped the ball on us on this inbound load that I handle. Can you handle it for us? You never know when those opportunities are going to arise, or when their suppliers are going to drop the ball and they say, you know what, I know Ben. Let's call Ben, because he delivers shipments to our facilities every day. He can get this into us right away. Contact him because we need this shipment. You never know when those opportunities are going to come. So when you have those relationships with the warehouse team, with the loaders, you never know when a loader is going to say, hey, there's Ben who just brought us donuts and brought us pizza from Echo. Hey, like, you could end up getting carrier referrals. You could end up getting whatever other kind of referrals. You never know where those referrals will come from when you're just being nice and being a team player to the entire staff that's actually handling the business and handling the loads.
Well said, man. I mean, it's almost like you have your eyes on my book. Last week, maybe it was Wednesday, maybe Thursday, a guy from the engineering department of my client, his supplier dropped the ball. They needed it ASAP. And he's like, Ben, please help us, right? Just because I spoke to him when he needed tracking on a delivery. And because of that, he has my info. Now, you mentioned a couple things. Number one, when you're going to an account, everyone's important. Yeah. The person that cleans the bathrooms, the person that restocks the toothpicks, I don't care. Every single person you treat with respect. It's sir, it's ma'am. You are not better than anyone. Absolutely. Now, when you come, you have to be different. Everyone brings donuts. Everyone, right? And if you're coming to an account at 10:30, donuts too late. Donuts too late. So what are you going to bring that's different? I'm very big on gifting, but not in the sense that you'd think. I never spend more than $30, $40 on a gift, right? Yeah. There's a book called Giftology, The Art of Gifting, and that really changed my life. It talks about gift impressions, right? Some of the gifts that I give, like to my father-in-law, he's a big runner. He runs a lot. What do I gift him? I gift him running shoes, because every step he takes, he thinks about how he got those shoes, right? So shoes are a really good one. In the book, it talks about Cutco knives. Now, those are really expensive, but you can customize those to say, for the family of Thomas Werdine, that kind of thing. And it lasts for a while. What people do nowadays is they will give, by the way, love the hat, Truck Parking Club, real great. Shout out to Reed, CMO.
Amazing.
Love guy, right? But that's what I mean is, like, that's a cool company that you support, you have a connection to. But when you're giving people swag of like BBL Incorporated, let's just say, you don't really have to do that. This cup right here, this right here is from a client, and it's not a coffee client. It's a women's pads client, like a UTI client. And every time I drink out of that, I think about my boy Enrique. That's the perfect gift, because he knows that I like coffee and I drink coffee just like the rest of us. And he got one for my wife too, and he put my wife's name on it. So those kinds of gifts, I've been doing bobbleheads, right? Bobbleheads are like $80, $90. That's your bigger kind of client. Something that will do the talking for you. And I just think that when you come in respectful, because there's a lot of people, when you're talking to somebody that can't bring you any benefit, right? Yeah. They don't touch freight, nothing. And they can tell sometimes that you aren't really invested. And so then everything's just not genuine, right? Yep. Their body language is a little bit out. They're maybe, doing other stuff. And so it's a lot about being genuine. And I think, again, it goes back to the basics of like humankind.
Yeah.
Being genuine, being polite, being thorough. Your word is your bond. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it and you think, it's a Friday, maybe they're okay, it's Labor Day. Like if you said you're going to do something, you got to do it. And I even remember like a couple months ago, my wife and I were watching a movie and I just remembered that I promised this guy I would quote him by the end of the day. And I forgot. And it was 8 p.m. And I said, I stopped everything and I quoted that truck because at the end of the day, maybe some other people don't take it as serious. But if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, the analogy that a lot of people at Echo have heard me say is that relationships are like kitchen sinks. Every issue that comes is a dish. And if you don't wash that dish, if you don't kind of approach and address that issue, they're going to start stacking and resentment will start stinking. And so it's all about anytime you have an issue, the load didn't deliver, maybe the carrier dropped the ball, maybe you dropped the ball. Own that, call that out, right? I do a lot of calls with my clients that we call continuous improvement calls, where it's just a stage for them to talk about what's right, what's wrong, how can we grow?
Yeah.
And even those are a certain way that like people have tried to emulate what I do, but it's that consistency. It's that just being intentional and being consistent. Going back to a post I wrote last week of like, it's not about being perfect. You're not going to be perfect. So throw that out. But if you do everything consistently, even if some days you don't have it, people are going to notice that and appreciate that. And I have gained trust internally because of those kind of consistent habits.
I love it, Ben.
Yes.
As we're coming up on time, I want to ask, like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's newer to freight sales, especially about like building those relationships and like you were just talking about, like staying persistent? It's a lot. I saw a post earlier today, and I apologize to the person who made it. I don't remember who it was. It was like 6 a.m. this morning, and now it's 12 hours later. I should remember, but they were talking about freight brokers and how we kind of give up our lives in a sense to kind of like what you said. You stopped everything you were doing at 8 p.m. when you were with your wife, finally winding down and watching a movie, and you remember, oh crap, I got to quote this load. I made a promise. We tend to like focus on a lot of our books, and he said, a lot of people don't think about it from this perspective, but freight brokers really do give up a lot to service their clients. At least the good ones do. So, what can you say about, being persistent and kind of staying on top of those things, even when it's a little bit tough to do?
Yeah. You said a lot, and there's a lot that I can't say, but what I'll kind of minimize is, if this is your only job, right? If this is your kind of main breadwinner job, then this is the engine that runs your life.
Yeah.
And the way that I did is I literally drew a circle and I did this like life map where it's like, okay, here's work, here's my family, obviously my wife included, here's my friends, here's everything else. How do I get them to connect? And once you have everyone aligned, like my wife and I, we have our own schedule on my phone. I know exactly what she's doing. She knows what kind of day I have. And then when we also set time just for us, the freight world is one that you do dedicate a lot of time. The job's really never over. And the worst part about this job is that it's what have you done for me recently? You could crush it 1,000 loads and you mess up the last 3. What happened, right? The best advice I can give new people is to build a team around you, even if that team changes. You need somebody to learn from. You need somebody to grow with. You need somebody to vent to. There's so many people that play a role in my success, both family, both friends, coworkers. You need to build a team because this job is very lonely and it's also very stressful and it's also very physical. And people are surprised. What do you mean physical? Man, this job will dry you and burn you out and it will just cripple you, right? Yep. The stress to me is something that I call physical. And when you don't align things in your personal life correctly, whether it's you're not waking up on time or you're not working the right hours or you turn off your phone at 4 p.m. Pacific, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, right? Because you can't be everywhere all at once. But clients do expect you to respond when there's issues. So how are you going to do that? And my answer is, if you don't know, ask. Yeah. That's just the bottom line. Because if you're in an organization where you tell them, I don't know and I need help, and you don't get it, Try again. You don't get it again, I think you should leave that company, because I've never heard of that. People are inherently kind, especially in freight, to their own people. And if you're genuine, just like I mentioned with shippers, if you come to them with the genuine questions and you are respectful, you're on time, you're only going to benefit from that. And just by the fact that you and I are on this podcast, it's people that sent energy one way and received it, and now we're on a call. It's the same thing when you're asking for help. I need help. Great. Come here. Let's talk about it. 75% of your job is on you. The rest is on who else is in your life, managers, coworkers, what have you. And I think the last thing that I'll say is you have to be okay with failing in freight. Just because of the amount of loads you do, whether you're a big broker that does a bunch of loads or a broker that does 100 loads a month. You're dealing with a lot of opportunities to get fired, to have a truck, break down, to have a driver miss a pickup, for your team to drop the ball. And so you're not going to be perfect. But if you are genuine, if you own it, if you communicate, if you're respectful, people will let it slide, right? You might have to bleed a little bit. You might have to give them some money, what have you. But overall, I firmly believe the logistics market is a positive one, full of super duper hardworking people. It starts with the carriers and drivers. Without them, we're nothing. And it finishes with our clients that give us the business, right? But the job's never done. And I think people like you and I will continue to grow and excel because it's not just about us. It's about something bigger than us, right? And as cheesy as that sounds, I believe in it. That's how I work every day, and that's how I'll continue to work. And I think, going back to that energy comment, if you are giving positive energy, if you're helping people, if you're doing good on earth, there's just a funny way that the world works and things kind of fall in. Whereas if you are somebody that's pessimistic and negative, I've had moments of that where everything just starts piling on and you feel like how could this all happen today, right? But, the last thing I'll say is, even in those moments where it's like, how could it all happen today? Go grab a teammate, go grab a mentor, talk it through, because I guarantee you they've been through it as well. You're never alone.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Thank you for having me, dude.
No, of course, man. Anytime. If the audience wants to get in touch, they want to learn more, they want to follow some of your really good posts you post on LinkedIn, how can they find you online? Where are you posting the most?
Just go to LinkedIn. Go to Ben Bar-Lev. I think there's only like 2 of us in the world. You'll find me. I'm very active, and I'm always willing to help, jump on a call, and give positive energy. Always.
If you guys like today's podcast, make sure you give it a like and review. Don't forget, we do drop 3 weekly newsletters at ThinkFreight.io. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. And don't forget to think freight.